can know everything about investing, the ratios, the charts, the formulas, and still be terrible with money. And you can know almost nothing about finance and still build quiet, lasting wealth. Morgan Housel wrote this book to explain why. And the answer has almost nothing to do with intelligence. It has everything to do with behavior.
No one is crazy. Here is the first thing Housel wants you to understand. When people make what looks like a terrible financial decision, they are almost never being irrational. They are being rational, based on their own experience. Someone who grew up during a depression hoards cash. Someone who grew up in a bull market takes risks that seem reckless. Neither is wrong. They are both responding to the world they actually lived through. Your personal experience with money makes up a tiny fraction of what has actually happened in the world, but it makes up almost everything of how you think the world works. This is why finance is so complicated. The numbers are universal. The behavior is not.
Getting rich versus staying rich? Housel draws a line that most people never think about. Getting wealthy and staying wealthy are two completely different skills, and they require opposite mindsets. Getting wealthy requires optimism, risk, putting yourself out there, believing things will go up. Staying wealthy requires the opposite, humility, frugality, a quiet fear of losing what you have. The problem is that the skill that builds the money is the exact skill that destroys it if you never switch modes. Many people who made fortunes lost them, not because they stopped being smart, but because they kept taking the same risks that made them rich in the first place. Housel's word for the thing that bridges both skills is survival. If he had to summarize financial success in one word, that would be it. Not intelligence, not insight, survival. Stay in the game long enough, and compounding does the work.
The compounding nobody talks about. Warren Buffett is worth, at the time of writing, around $84 billion. Most people know that. What most people don't know is this. $84 billion of that was accumulated after his 50th birthday. He didn't become rich because he was a great investor. He became that rich because he started investing as a child and never stopped. The returns compounded over decades that most investors never give their money. Housel's point is not that you need to start young, though starting early helps. His point is that compounding is counterintuitive in a way that even intelligent people consistently underestimate. It doesn't grow linearly. It explodes, eventually, in a way that feels almost unfair, but only if you don't interrupt it. Good investing, then, is not about making brilliant decisions. It is about consistently not screwing up. The biggest enemy of compounding is not a bad market. It is a person who panics and sells.
Wealth is what you don't see. There is a difference between being rich and being wealthy. Housel is precise about this. Rich is visible. The car, the watch, the house. Rich is income spent on things that signal success to other people. Wealth is invisible. It is the money not spent, the investments sitting quietly in an account, the options and flexibility that money creates, the ability to say no to a job you hate, to take a risk you believe in, to handle a crisis without collapsing. The problem is that we judge financial success by what we can see, so we spend to look wealthy, and in doing so, we destroy the actual wealth we could have had. Nobody is as impressed by your possessions as you think they are, and the people who look the wealthiest on the outside are often the furthest from actual financial security.
The highest dividend money can pay. Housel argues there is one thing money does that matters above everything else. It buys you control over your time. Not status, not comfort, time. The ability to wake up and decide how you spend the next 8 hours. That, more than anything, is what separates people who are happy from people who are not. Research consistently shows that the loss of control over your schedule, even in a job you like, creates the same psychological weight as doing something you actively dislike. The commute, the meeting you didn't choose, the email you have to answer right now,
These are not small frictions. They accumulate into something that no salary fully compensates for. The goal of money, if there is one, is not to buy more things. It is to buy back your time. That is the return worth optimizing for.
Reasonable beats rational. Here is something counterintuitive, Housel argues. You should not try to be perfectly rational with money. You should try to be reasonable. A spreadsheet says you should put every dollar into index funds and never touch it. Your spreadsheet doesn't feel panic during a 40% market crash. You do. And if your strategy requires you to behave like a machine during the worst moments of your financial life, you will not stick to it. A strategy you can actually follow, one that is slightly less optimal on paper but keeps you in the game, beats a perfect strategy you abandon when it hurts. This is not an excuse for laziness. It is a recognition that you are a person, not a model. The best financial plan is the one that accounts for your actual psychology, not the one that assumes you will always behave like a rational actor.
The price of everything. Every investment return has a price. The problem is, the price is not listed anywhere. Volatility is the price of stock market returns. Uncertainty is the price of long-term investing. Watching your portfolio drop 30% and sitting on your hands, that is the fee, not a fine, a fee. You are paying for the eventual gain. Most people see a market downturn as a signal that something has gone wrong. Housel argues it is proof that something is working, that you are invested in something that carries real risk, which is the only thing that carries real return. The mistake is not experiencing the drop. The mistake is not knowing in advance that the drop was always part of the deal and selling when it arrives.
Everything we just covered sounds logical when you hear it. The hard part is recognizing it in your own life, in real situations, in real time. So let's walk through what these ideas actually look like when they show up. Think about two people who grew up in the same city, same decade, but different households. One watched their parents lose a business during a recession. Every dinner table conversation was about cutting costs, avoiding debt, not trusting the market. By the time they're 30, they keep 6 months of cash in a savings account, earning almost nothing, and they sleep fine. The other grew up watching their parents' investment account double during a bull market. Risk felt normal. Leverage felt smart. By 30, they're comfortable putting everything into a single concentrated bet. Neither is irrational. They are both logical extensions of the world they actually experienced. The mistake is judging one by the other's rulebook. Now picture someone who built a small business from nothing by taking calculated risks, reinvesting profits, expanding fast, betting on themselves. It worked. Now they have real money for the first time in their life. The natural instinct is to keep doing what worked. Take another big bet, go concentrated, move fast. But the game has changed. When you had nothing, a loss meant starting over, painful but survivable. Now, a loss means losing what took a decade to build. The risk taker who built the wealth needs to make room for the paranoid protector who keeps it. Most people never make that switch, not because they're foolish, but because the behavior that got them there felt like identity. Then there are two people who both invest the same amount every month for 20 years. Person A checks their portfolio constantly. When the market drops 25%, they feel sick. They tell themselves they'll get back in when things stabilize, and they miss the recovery. They do this twice in 20 years. Person B set up automatic transfers on day one and genuinely forgot to check. Not because they're disciplined, because they were busy. After 20 years, Person B has significantly more money. Not because they made better decisions, because they made fewer decisions. Compounding rewards inaction in a way that feels deeply counterintuitive to people trained to believe that effort equals results.
Consider a doctor and a teacher who both end up in the same place at 60, despite very different incomes. The doctor earned 3 times more across their career, but every raise brought a bigger house, a newer car, private school tuition. The lifestyle expanded to match and then exceed the income. At 60, they have a high salary, high expenses, and very little accumulated. The teacher lived modestly, not out of deprivation, but out of indifference to status spending. At 60, the teacher has options. The doctor has obligations. Wealth is the gap between what you earn and what you spend. That gap is invisible from the outside, which is exactly why we keep misjudging who is actually wealthy. Two people leave the same company after 10 years. One takes a higher paying job with a brutal commute and a demanding schedule. The other takes a 20% pay cut to work remotely on their own terms. On a spreadsheet, the first person wins, but run the calculation differently. The second person reclaims 2 hours daily, controls when they start and stop, and can be present for the parts of life that don't wait. Housel's argument is that no salary figure fully compensates for the weight of a schedule you don't control. The money you use to buy back your time is not a cost. It is the highest return investment you will ever make.
A perfectly optimized portfolio might tell you to hold 100% equities with zero cash buffer because historically that maximizes long-term returns. But when the market drops 40% and you suddenly need money for a medical emergency, you are forced to sell at the worst possible moment. The strategy was rational. The life was not. A slightly less optimal portfolio, 80% equities and a 6-month cash reserve, would have let you survive the crisis without touching your investments. Lower return on paper, higher return in reality because you stayed in the game. The best financial strategy is not the one that looks best in a backtest. It is the one that survives contact with your actual life. That is what this book is really about. Not the numbers, the person behind the numbers. And that person, with all their fear, their history, their blind spots, and their very human need to feel okay, that is where every financial decision actually begins.